Hello, and this is Delia again. We are reading our last complete story in the 5 Minute Easter Storybook. We've read all of these stories so far. So if you want to see any of these stories, there's Stumper and the Egg, The Wishing Well, The Case of the Disappearing Easter Eggs, Mater and the Easter Buggy, The Easter Egg Hunt, the Surprise Ballet, Who's Afraid of the Easter Bunny, The Spring Parade, Spring Adventure, The Search for the Five Easter Eggs, and The Great Egg Hunt. And now we're on the last one called Basket of Trouble. It is the Monsters, Inc. So we're going to finish this up and then we will be done with this book for Easter time. Took us a while to read it, didn't it, Scarlett? Did you like it so far? It was good, wasn't it? Yeah, she liked it a lot. So we're going to finish it up and then we'll be done with this one and we can read new ones. Okay, here we go. 5 Minute Easter Stories. The final story. Basket of Trouble. Inside Monsters, Inc., Sully was coming out of a door on Scare Floor F, finishing his shift. As he and Mike headed for the locker room, they saw Charlie Proctor and George Sanderson standing outside another door. "Hi, guys," George said. "I just scared an entire slumber party full of little kids. They were dressed up like bunnies, which was odd. But now I'm thinking I'll be the seventh best scarier in no time." Charlie ran off to get started on his paperwork for Ross. As George turned to follow him, something made Sully and Mike stop in their tracks and gasp. They both pointed at George's tail. Hanging off of it was something terrible, something awful, something human. Spinning around at the sound of their gasp, George tried to see what had scared his friends. He spun until the object flew across the hall, right into Sully's hands. Sully's eyes grew wide as he looked at the object. It was shaped almost like the bottom half of an egg, without the top. Then he realized exactly what it was. A basket, a human's basket. Sully slowly let out a very unmonstrous squeak and threw it at Mike. Back and forth the basket flew among them, to Sully, to George, to Mike, and then back to George. None of them wanted to touch it. "This is," screeched George. "The worst," yelled Sully. "Keep it away from me," shouted Mike. Finally, Mike shouted, "Guys, keep it together. This is a human object, remember? We can't just stand here in the hallway with it." George nodded. "You're right," he said. "If Charlie sees me with this, I'll get 2319. Another 2319, and I can't have another run-in with the CDA." He reached behind him and patted his backside. "My fur just grew back." See, they're monsters. We're talking about human things. Mike took a deep breath. "Okay, first things first. We need to get into the locker room and stay there until we figure out a real plan." "How are we going to get in there?" asked Sully. "I don't want to touch it again." Mike grabbed his gym bag and pulled out a pair of shoes, a hammer, and a pair of sunglasses. "No, no, no," he whispered to himself. Finally, he found his oven mitts. "Here you go, big guy." Sully put them on and carefully picked up the basket. The three monsters made their way down the hall. Bursting into the locker room, they ran into Charlie. "Charlie," George says, "where are you doing here?" "Why wouldn't I be here?" Charlie asked, confused. Mike didn't hesitate because Charlie, he said, "We thought you were with Ross for the big award." Mike nodded. "I heard the CDA wanted to see you, something about a special badge for your help with those 2319s. You really should get going." Full of excitement, Charlie raced out the door. The trio of monsters sighed in relief. They needed to get the basket back through the proper door, fast. But just then the locker room door swung open and a group of monsters walked in. "Hey, fellas," said one of the monsters. One of the monsters said, greeting them. "Just grabbing my deodorant." Noticing the basket in Sully's hand, the monster looked curious. "What's that? Did management send us new scaring gear? 'Cause that thing is frightening. Look at all that pink. Let me take a look." No, Sully shouted, moving the basket away. I mean, nah, don't bother. It's just a prototype. Don't even work. Acting fast, George jumped onto a bench. All eyes turned to him. Hey, so have you heard the one about the oven mitts? The group of monsters waited for George to go on. They were so hot they were cool, he finally finished. As the other monsters groaned, Sully slipped out and Mike hesitated. George, tell him the one about where cows go for some fun, he said. Before George could say anything, another monster jumped in. The movies, he yelled. We've heard that one, but have you heard this one? As the monsters told the joke, Mike followed Sully to the scare floor and called back the doors George had gone through that day. Sully popped his head through the doorway, but he had no idea what he was looking for. Then Sully remembered that George had mentioned bunnies. He and Mike opened the door after door. They didn't find any long-eared bunnies. But Sully did run into a very affectionate cow. Then Mike saw something green sticking out from under one of the doors. It was a piece of grass, the same grass that was in the basket. Uh-oh. When they opened the door, they found the slumber party, full of kids wearing bunny ears. Sully tiptoed into the room. All he had to do was put the basket down and get out of there before anyone noticed him. Easter Bunny, is that you? Sully froze. One little girl was wide awake, staring at him with big, filled eyes. Then Sully noticed that she didn't have a basket next to her like all the other girls. Easter Bunny, the little girl said again. Not sure what else to do, Sully put the oven mitts on his horns and then began to hop like the bunny he saw on the television in the room. Did you bring back my basket? The girl asked. Sully held out the basket. The girl bounded to her feet and grabbed the handle. Sully had begun to walk back toward the door when, Easter Bunny, the girl said again, stopping him. You're blue, and you don't really look like a bunny. I'm in disguise, he whispered, turning for the door again. As Sully opened the door back to Monsters, Inc., he heard the little girl whisper, Silly little blue bunny. Sully smiled and hopped through the door. Once he was safely back on Scare Floor, he and Mike both let out relieved breaths. They had been so close, and too close. Those were some interesting moves back there, said Mike. If scaring doesn't work out, maybe you can get a job being an Easter Bunny, whatever that is. Sully shrugged. A scarrier's got to do what a scarrier's got to do, he replied as George called up to them. Hey, George, Mike said. You should see Sully's new trick. Show him, Sully. Hop to it. The big blue monster smiled and began to hop down the hall. Behind him, George and Mike just laughed. Just like a bunny. He hopped just like a bunny, and he was a monster, wasn't he? Did you like that story? Did you like your story?
Mm-hmm.
Yay! I hope y'all all enjoyed this cute little story, and there will be some more coming soon. Have a great and wonderful day.